And welcome to a new episode of the Geektown Behind the Scenes podcast. I'm your host, Dave Elliott, and this week I'm chatting with composer Jake Monaco. Jake is an American film and TV composer who's worked on a huge array of projects, from some of the biggest film scores in the past decade to children's TV shows and pretty much everything in between. We've previously spoken to Jake about his work on Netflix's Dino Trucks and Amazon's The Stinky and Dirty Show, and working as a producer and composer of additional music for Christoph Beck, where he worked on huge projects such as Frozen, the Hangover trilogy, and The Muppets. Jake's latest project is a bit of a departure from some of the work we've spoken to him about before, as he scores National Geographic's incredible animal journeys, narrated by Hawkeye himself, Jeremy Renner, which you can currently find on Disney Plus in the UK. It's a fascinating nature series which follows the travels of a huge array of animals, from humpback whales down to dung beetles and many, many other species. We discuss Jake's approach to the soundscape for the series and creating the music most fitting for each creature's journey. Also, since we last spoke to Jake, he's worked on a number of other projects for Disney, including things like Cars on the Road, Forky Asks a Question, and Lamp Life. So we touch on those too, as well as a number of his other projects. It's always lovely catching up with Jake. He's a wonderful person to talk to. He has this incredible weird selection of instruments, which we discuss a little bit as well. It's a really lovely interview, and he's always fun to chat with. If you want to hear more behind the scenes interviews, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast by searching for Geektown Radio. This also gives you our weekly Geektown Radio podcast, which brings you all the latest TV, film, and gaming news. You can also go to the website at geektown.co.uk for daily news stories and all the latest UK and US TV premiere dates. I know the main show has been off air for a number of weeks. We will be back with a regular Geektown Radio show very, very soon. But for now, here is the interview with Jake Monaco. It's lovely to be able to be chatting with you again, because we have spoken twice before. I think it was, 2018 was the last time, and then 2016 was the first time we talked.
Yeah, it's great to be able to kind of follow this along and kind of catch up every few years.
Yeah, it's good. I do this with some of the other composers. You still got, I think Phil Eisler is the one to beat, because he's got like 6 or 8 appearances. So.
All right, Phil, I'm coming after you.
So, yeah. I've spoken to Phil a number of times, and who's the other one? The guy with the Wurlitzer. His name escapes me. Nate Barr.
Nate Barr. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, the gigantic Wurlitzer organ that he purchased and put together. That thing is amazingly massive.
Yes, I think every composer in LA has seen. Have you actually been over and seen it? Because I think everybody's been over and seen it at this point.
I know. I got to give him a call and try to get my tickets to come over there and actually sit at it.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's been hugely popular.
Yeah.
It's funny because Phil and Nate were talking, and after he'd completed it, Phil was like looking at it, going, "Oh, well, this is brilliant." But that's going to be in absolutely everything you write from now on. He's like, maybe.
Oh, I love it. It's great.
Yeah, it has been. He just hides it really, really well because of everything he can do with it. It's nuts, that. But
awesome.
Yeah.
Becomes a signature sound there.
Yeah, if there's something weird in there, the chances are it's gone through the Wurlitzer at some point.
Yeah.
So we're on really to talk about your new show, your latest show, which is a bit of a kind of detour from some of the other stuff that we talked to you about, because a lot of the stuff we've been talking to you about in the past has been kid shows, has been, you know, Dino Trucks and Stinky or Dirty and Be Cool Scooby-Doo and all that sort of stuff. So you have done some Disney stuff, I think, since we last talked, because you did Forky Asks a Question and Cars on the Road, which I think was done after last time we talked. So how did Incredible Animal Journeys come to you then?
I think my relationship with Disney and Pixar specifically has been really great since 2016, when I started working on Piper a little bit. And then through a series of recommendations and meeting different people up at the studios, somehow my name got up to National Geographic when they started talking about this show and looking for music. And I think that my name kind of popped up in there. I remember getting the brief originally, and a few pages into the brief, they talk about their bar of storytelling that they're trying to meet or exceed is Pixar's Piper, in terms of the way that we're following the characters and how we're feeling for them. And we really grow attached to them. We celebrate their victories and we mourn their losses. And you know, I think Pixar always does that just so well. These animated shorts that have no dialogue. It's all about the visual, it's all about the sound effects, and it's all about the music. And I think that when they were kind of thinking about Incredible Animal Journeys and what makes this series different than others of the same kind of nature, pun intended, you know, Planet Earth, Blue Planet, a lot of these other things, it's a different sound, and it's approaching the storytelling a little bit differently. You are following these families, you know, typically a mother and child, or sometimes when, you know, the child is abandoned very young or still in an egg, then we're following the child and seeing what they're doing and how they're learning how to go on their very first migration and what they do in the beginning parts of their lives. And so we're following 2 to 3 main characters in each episode. We keep coming back to them and joining them on their journey. So it's a little bit less about the overall spectacle of what one species is doing, and it's more about the family relationship and how these newborns are learning the ropes as they go.
It's a really sort of interesting idea for it. And you've got Hawkeye in there narrating it, Jeremy Renner.
I know.
Which is great. I mean, it's like Disney go through and look who's on the payroll and just go, that guy.
No, it's great to be able to hear his voice. And I think he does a really great job of narrating us along. Mm-hmm. I think he does. He brings a lot to it. So I'm happy that we were all matched together. Yeah,
no, it's wonderful. How do you go about approaching the music for a show like that? Because, I mean, it's got to be quite different to doing your animation sort of stuff, particularly the sort of more kids animation that you were doing.
Yeah. Actually, what's funny is out of all of the series and films that I've done, I think this show actually most closely relates to what I was doing in Dino Trucks for the 3.5 years that I was on that show. I remember the showrunners and the creative team just gave me so much freedom. You know, with each episode, we created a theme for the new character, and, you know, it was kind of integrated overall into the score, but we still had the familiarity of our main characters that are, you know, in the overarching series. And it wasn't a very specific, you know, all orchestral or very traditional sound. When it comes to Incredible Animal Journeys, they wanted kind of the same thing. They did not want to go traditional. So we're not talking about just large orchestra and, you know, just the big grandiose chords, which are beautiful. And they really give a very large soundscape to what we're seeing of the spectacle in nature. But they wanted this to sound a little bit less traditional. And, you know, what can we do to make it sound less traditional? So I didn't want to necessarily go in the synth direction, and they didn't really want that either. So where is that middle ground? And I found that taking a lot of these organic elements, similarly to the pitched boom whackers and the Hoya tubes that I used on Dino Trucks, where they're still, their source is still organic, but then taking them and manipulating them in some way to make them sound a little bit more processed or a little bit more interesting. I did that a lot. My assistant Jose plays violin and viola, and being able to take a line or some sort of little gesture from that and then, you know, delay and verb it out and create this texture out of it. it still has the organic tactile feel to it, but it's not just a regular violin that you're hearing. And I think that appears all over the series. From our individual strings, I worked a little bit with other individual musicians, a trombonist, a saxophonist, someone who plays all sorts of flutes that exist. And I gave them a page with a bunch of scribbles on it. Essentially, it might have something that scribbles from a large section into this tiny thing and then goes up. And what is the musician's interpretation of that? It might be a or something kind of random and crazy like that. And I asked for a bunch of drones that maybe is a single note, but maybe it's pulsing a little bit, and maybe it's kind of bending its pitch a little bit. So I would take all this stuff and then flip it down an octave, and all of a sudden you get this very ominous kind of or this wavering pad that sits underneath that makes us very uncomfortable, which is exactly what I'm looking for in some of these scenes. But again, it still has the little bit of life to it. So I think that's how much it relates back to the Dino Trucks and being able to really do the exact same thing. We didn't have a large scoring budget per se on the show, so it was trying to figure out how to use that most efficiently, and being able to book about 3 days, I think 3.5 days over with the Budapest Orchestra that was just strings. You always need strings a little bit.
Yeah.
But, getting some of that in there, on top of all of the more unique sounds and the process sounds, and a lot of the other solo musicians that were a part of this production.
That's a really interesting approach, sort of, doing it that way. Because you've talked about the characters in this, and it is a wide variety of animals. I mean, you're literally from like humpback whales to dung beetles. So, finding sounds that fit particular animals for this. Are you sort of looking at, deeper sounds for things like the whales and maybe lighter sounds for some of the insects and that sort of stuff? Yeah.
So I always tried to find something that had to do with the animal in some respect. So for instance, the rock hopper penguins, I used a bunch of quirkier instruments, but one of which was skiddaw stones, which is essentially a stone marimba. Rock hopper's stone,
right?
Yeah. Okay, great. So I try to find something that has to do with it. The humpback whales, which migrate from Hawaii to Alaska and back every year. I actually was connected to a traditional Hawaiian singer, and I found a piece from a more traditional Hawaiian prayer. Whales play a large part in their culture. And so I had written a melody, and I kind of worked with her a little bit. I was like, what if it's these lyrics over this? And she was like, well, you could take this and then put this here, and, it would still make sense, but it would fit within the melody. Great. So then she sang it a few times. She gave me a few other things, and I took all that back and worked with it a little bit, and then sent her a little bit more back to kind of sweeten and sing a little bit more, and gave her a little bit more instruction. And I get all this amazing, authentic Hawaiian vocals that now are attached to the theme of the humpback whale. Similarly, in other episodes, just finding the little bit of a quirky nature here and there. There are these Christmas Island red crabs that just kind of carpet the ground, and with their weird sidestep that they do. And we ended up doing like a night circus kind of Eastern Romanian vibe, which really worked well to their quirkiness and bouncing along there. There was a lot of vocals. They did fall in love with vocals overall. And so whether it's a solo singer, there's a lot of solo male singing in the first episode, Chasing the African Rains. And then in other episodes, there's a lot of solo female vocals. And on top of that, there's a lot of choir that ended up being sampled, but it's just great samples that really blend with everything. And, I'm all about this kind of building up tension and then having a nice big release. So that was like the consistent sound across the entire series were human vocals. It sounds like it's a really interesting and different soundtrack, because there is a danger with these sort of nature things of they do all, it's David Attenborough, the voice, the strings, there's orchestra, there's a danger of it all being like, so it's quite nice that they've got you going down a very different route for this. You have mentioned
mentioned a couple of the instruments you use there. I know you love your strange instruments. So is there anything else particularly that you picked up that you use for this?
Yeah. So also in that same opening episode, Chasing the African Rains, one of the main characters is Flamingo. And I worked with a musician, Gina Luciani, and she plays a traditional African flute called a fula, which only plays a certain notes on it in a couple of octaves. So when writing the theme for that character, part of the challenge and constraint to that was only using the notes that were actually playable by the instrument. And she was also great to work with. So, kind of relating those two things. There's an episode that originally was called Air, focuses on the monarch butterfly and the African swallow and both of their massive migrations that they make. And throughout all of that, my goal was to not use strings in the majority, if not all, of the episode, focusing it mostly on wind instruments and, kind of embracing that. So seeing what other kinds of things that I was able to do. So there's a lot of flutes, ocarinas, there's some trombone and bass clarinets, being able to find whatever I could that wasn't using strings. What could I substitute in there? There's some other neat kind of vocal calls that are in the polar parenting episode, which all takes place near the Arctic Circle. We're following caribou and polar bears. Some of the instruments might not necessarily tie directly to the animal. However, it's filling their sonic identity. Mm-hmm. So there was a little bit of like an electric guitar and harp sparkle that follows the polar bear cubs as they go, and a very distinct kind of harmonic bell tone, still keeping things a little bit shimmery for the entire episode of Ice and trying to really embrace that.
It sounds like it's pulled together a really interesting set of things for it. So obviously it's been an interesting time in Hollywood recently with all the strikes. Has that been affecting you that much with the type of work that you work on?
So it didn't really affect this project. We were wrapping we had about a month or two left on this when all the strikes began. Plus this production was based out of the UK. So, right. Didn't relate too much. And also, aside from Jeremy doing all of his narration, which all occurred prior to the strike, there wasn't much SAG or union involvement. And typically also in animation, you can kind of get away with still proceeding with some of the production during some of these strikes as well. But I didn't really feel it until maybe a month or so ago when everything kind of wound down. And now it's, we were kind of itching to finalize this new deal so that we can, really move forward and everybody can get back to work. I mean, it's not only, the composers that are feeling it. I mean, it goes down to every single little nook and cranny of the industry. We have costumes and makeup and everybody just feels it all the way down the line. So I'm very happy at this point that it is all resolved and we can move forward.
Yes. Yeah. It's annoying it took the studios this long to come round, but I'm glad that they've come to an agreement that at least everybody's back to work. Plus, it also means that when I go to Comic Cons now, they can actually tell me stuff. Yeah. there's like been a lot of sort of what's your favorite color sort of type questions, and because they're allowed to do panels, they're just not allowed to talk about anything. So yep. There's been a lot of that going on.
Yeah. So it's tough to do any sort of publicity, with the actors and actresses, on any new projects that are coming out. So, it's also hurting just the releases. I know that productions have already been pushed from their release dates, that were going to be early next year into, later in the summer or some and even into the following year.
Yeah, that's been, I just, Comic Cons have been a very interesting sort of thing, talking around, they've got the actors up on stage, but are having to talk around the thing that they're most famous for and the reason why they're there. Yeah. So it's been sort of interesting, but now you've got this done. What else have you got coming up? Is there anything that you can talk about at the moment?
I actually just finished doing some arrangements of a lot of Frozen songs into little medleys. Disney in general is investing a lot of money into the parks, in the coming years. Yeah. And what they have been working on for the last, I want to say 7 or 8 years, is developing Hong Kong Disneyland's Frozen World. And so they're doing this whole opening spectacular that's, 20 to 30 minutes long. And there's a big performance medley of things that's like 6.5 minutes. They're doing a big drone show. That's another 6 to 7 minutes. There's some special guests that are going to be there that come on and make some announcements. And there's a big lighting of a castle towards the end. And there's all these different aspects that were really, really cool to be able to work with the creatives on, figure out what was going to be best, because then the drone programmers have to then use this to be able to program these hundreds and thousands of flying drones that are going in the air. And I think that is one of the most spectacular things that I've seen over the course of the last 5-6 years that, some of these productions have been doing with the drones. It's amazing to see. So I'm really hoping that they post the whole opening ceremony, whether it's to Disney Plus or somewhere where everybody gets to enjoy it, because I really do think it's going to be a spectacular event.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, there's going to be a lot of fans that would love to see that, I'm sure. So, and some of those light shows and things that they do just daily at the Disney parks are spectacular. I saw the California Adventure. They do a like water light show thing where they project things onto sheets of water.
Yeah, the World of Color.
The World of Color. That's one. Yeah,
it's amazing. Some of these things, I really give them props, because every year even it gets revamped in a way where it does feel fresh and new.
They're incredible, those sort of things, and it's an amazing mix of sort of sound and music. So that must be a really interesting thing to get involved with, doing the sort of remixes, because you've done other Frozen stuff before, haven't you? So I got to work on the original film with composer Christoph Beck, and so ever since that, which is crazily enough is 10 years ago this month, it was released, which is just mind-blowing. But also what's funny is I was recording this production for the Hong Kong Disney. Meanwhile, Chris was over in Tokyo doing something for a ride over at that park. So a lot of these parks are now in kind of in tandem celebrating Frozen's 10th anniversary and bringing them to life in the parks, which I think it's really exciting for everybody. I think it's going to do wonders. Yeah, it's amazing, that sort of stuff. And I'm sure there's going to be massive celebrations all around the world for it. Last couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
They're the same that I ask you every time. So I can't remember what your answers were last time. So we'll see what they are this time. But first one is, if you had the opportunity to work on any TV series, something from the past, something present day, or some sort of future genre that you haven't worked in yet, what would it be?
Since I was a kid, I remember watching the original X-Men animated series, which I know that they're about to reboot. They're in the process of rebooting.
Yes.
Currently. So I'm excited to see what they do with this. However, I think one of the really cool things that I would love to work on in the future is when Marvel does break into more of the X-Men storylines and kind of tying all these multiverses together. It would be amazing to not only be a part of that universe and kind of go there, but I remember my favorite character being Gambit. So, my goal would be his solo movie. I'm on it.
well, at least
very specific.
I mean, it has to come eventually. I mean, once they've reintroduced the X-Men, which they're taking their sweet time about, but yes, I'm sure it'll come. That's a really good choice, and you are at least involved in the Disney stuff now, so you're in the right track for that. So that's awesome. Good. Thank you for spending a little bit of time to catch up. It's always lovely chatting with you, and I'm really looking forward to this show coming out, because it looks like it's going to be a really good National Geographic nature thing. So hopefully that will come out reasonably soon over here on Disney Plus as well, because sometimes they don't release everything together. But yes, there's a little delay. So I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully speak to you again. We'll try not to leave it like 4 years again this time.
Well, not if I got to catch up with Phil. So we'll make it again sooner.
Well, you need to be much quicker.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me, and it's been great to talk.
Lovely to talk to you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Stop.